Hi guys, I'm Laura Vitale. It is baking season. I am ready to fill my kitchen with warm, delicious scent of comfort, and I'm making apple strudel. It's so good. I asked you on Instagram last week because I was playing around with the recipe. I asked you, do you prefer it with puff pastry or do you prefer it with phyllo? Everyone with the exception of one, and I'm talking thousands on the poll, said puff pastry. So we're just making it with puff pastry. A lot of you said that you prefer it with puff pastry, but like in Germany, you make it with a very specific pastry, but no one gave me the details. So if you are from Germany or you make your strudel, or from wherever you're from and you make your strudel with a very specific pastry that's not neither, I would love to know. I find that very, very fascinating, as you know. But I do love puff pastry. I think it's a lot easier to use than phyllo. If phyllo kind of makes you a bit nervous and it worries you, then puff pastry is always the way to go. I'm taking a few apples. They're not the best apples in the world, but it's fantastic for this. I use Honeycrisp because it's my favorite apple. I always have them around. They're a little bit banged up and a little bit bruised because they fell all out of my bag and they probably helped bruise them up quite a bit, but it's going to work perfectly here. In a skillet, I have a tiny bit of butter. To it, I'm going to add some brown sugar. And I'm just going to let those kind of mix together and start to bubble. To that, I'm going to add my apples. I just slice my apples in half and then just slice them about. Not too thick, not too thin, because we're not trying to turn this into applesauce. Just right. You could use Honeycrisp for this, which is what I always have on hand, so it's my go-to apple. You could use like a Granny Smith if you like a more tart apple. Whatever your heart desires. Go ahead and just slice your apples right in. And then we're going to add just a touch of cinnamon, and we're going to let these all cook for about 10 minutes on medium heat. The apples will start to slump and cook down, giving them a good head start before we wrap them in puff pastry and then pop them into the oven. So I'm just going to continue to slice. I don't have very many left, and then they're going to need to cook down. But I'm going to show you just how much cinnamon they're going to need, which is really totally optional and like it's up to preference. If I was making this for my dad, I wouldn't even add the cinnamon because Papa Sal and cinnamon are not friends. So I would just do it with vanilla, which we will add later. But for now, a sprinkle of cinnamon, adding the last of my apples and letting these cook for about 10 minutes. Apples look fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and hit them with a cornstarch slurry, which is just a little bit of cornstarch and a little bit of water. And what that's going to do is it's going to thicken any of the apple sort of juices. And at first you'll think, wow, that really like dried it out a lot. But as it bakes, those apples will continue to cook and will release more juice. So it's like the perfect consistency in your strudel. I'm also going to hit them with a pinch of salt. Salt in sweets does two things. It balances the sweetness, obviously, but it also does exactly the same thing. See, some of them are falling apart. That's perfect. I'm actually going to remove it from the heat. I'm going to add a splash of vanilla. What I was saying was salt in sweets does the same thing it does in savory dishes. It makes something really pop. It makes the food taste of itself. Like if you put a pinch of salt on a tomato, now all of a sudden that tomato is so good. And if you hadn't, it would have been just really bland. It does the same thing to sweets. If you bake a cake or whatever without salt, it tastes really bland. If you add a pinch of salt, it somehow makes all of those flavors come to life. I'm going to go ahead and take this filling, put it in my shallow bowl, and I'm going to let this cool for quite a bit. I want it to be quite cool because I don't want it to make my pastry really, really gummy. So it's probably going to take a good 20 minutes or so. And in the meantime, I'm just going to preheat my oven to 375, line a baking sheet with parchment paper. And then when I'm ready, I will grab my puff pastry out of the freezer. And I'm going to go ahead and make an egg wash, which is just one egg beaten with a bit of milk or cream or water or whatever, and set that aside so that we are ready to assemble. Apples are cooled. oven is ready and we're ready to pretty much assemble. This is incredibly easy, but I'm telling you, this is so delicious. It's particularly delicious if you want to treat someone to this for like a holiday breakfast. It's super good, and it's the kind of thing that's easy enough that you don't have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do. You're going to take a sheet of puff pastry. You're going to keep it in the fridge until last minute because puff pastry is full of butter, as we know, and you want to keep that cold so that it is flaky and wonderful and delicious. You kind of want to just roll this out. I really prefer a French rolling pin, but mine's upstairs, so we're just going to have to make do with this one. And you're just going to roll it out like an inch bigger on all sides. Not that hard, but I promise you it is worth it. I love a French pastry, a French rolling pin so much more. I know I already said that, but I'll say it again. All right, easy peasy. It's really not that difficult. Just need some patience, you know? Okay, that's good enough. I don't want to do it too thin. I brush off any excess flour, and then I take my apple filling. You see how the puff pastry has kind of 3 sections? That middle section, you can kind of see the seams. I keep the apples in that middle section. And because we cooked the apples ahead of time, they're really soft and wonderful. I'm going to use the word hate, which I don't use often, but I hate apple anything, like an apple pie, an apple galette, an apple crisp. I hate apple anything where the apples are still crunchy. Like it's a no for me. If it's crunchy, I don't want it. I will not be eating it. It's not my thing. I don't want texture. I want that apple to quite literally fall apart and be soft and luxurious and delicious. And if it's not that, I simply want no part of it. Just flatten it out a little bit like that. And then you're going to take your egg wash. Now I know I grabbed a pastry brush. I know I grabbed a pastry brush, and I know it's around here somewhere. Where is it? I don't know, but I guarantee you that I will find it when I am done talking to you. But you know, I have 74,000 down here. Take a little bit of a pastry brush, brush it on both sides. I don't do the whole like cut it in strips and then fold it like a braid. I do not do that. And I simply don't do that because you always give yourself a little border, you always get juices that overflow and run all over the place. So I just kind of do it like that and doing like that, kind of overlap it, seal the edges. So easy, so much easier, right? Seal the edges, and then I just, without punching it through, I seal that like so, and it's like a beautiful little package. Then I like easy, okay? I like things that are easy. Move this over. This is going to be the bottom, so watch what I do. Very carefully slide it, flip it like that, and then I just take a sharp knife and make little slits like so. I'm going to go ahead and brush this with my egg wash and then pop it in my preheated oven at 375 for about half an hour or so. But before I do that, there's one last step that I like to do. Totally unnecessary, might I add, but I quite enjoy it. I enjoy the color, I enjoy the texture, I enjoy the whole bit, and that is sprinkling it with a little bit of sugar. You could use coarse sugar or just regular granulated sugar. Pop this in. When it's ready, I'll show you what it looks like. This is complete perfection. You see why I seal it the way that I do? Because I don't want that sort of goopy sauce from the apples to run out all over the place. Now mine baked for exactly 30 minutes, but keep an eye on it. I've said this before. I have 2 different ovens. They cook completely different. This one cooks very precisely. The other one that I have upstairs is very low, very slow. So it takes longer. Traditionally, you do a glaze for this. I think a glaze, which is just for this, it would just be sugar, powdered sugar, and milk, unnecessary to the max because it's already rich and flaky. I don't feel like the need to add any. So I like to do confectioner's sugar because that's my preference, but if you wanted to do a glaze, you could. Oh, the sound. Oh, it's still steamy. It's still steaming. Look how gorgeous that is. You see, nothing is sort of running out all over the place. It's perfection. It smells fantastic. I know the apples are going to be perfectly cooked and tender, which is how I like it. And this is so soft and flaky. Absolute. Perfect. In every way. Flavor, texture. 10 out of 10. Go log in the kitchen.com for the written recipe. Hope you enjoyed spending time with me. Make this for Thanksgiving morning. I will see you in the next one. Bye.